Hello, everybody. This is Johnny with the Musing podcast, where we discuss all things cannabis, especially in regards to the community, the science, the health, the business, products, as well as entertainment. And because it is the Musing Monkey, I certainly would not be surprised if we get down some rabbit trails. So hang on tight as we get started for this few minutes. Thanks for joining me. Cheers. All right, we are here to start the day. May your day be awesome, more awesomer than yesterday. Enjoy it. We're up here in Alaska, beautiful sunshine, warm weather. We had an amazing snowstorm, got to do some sledding, got some bumps and bruises, but made it out alive, and now it's all gone. And it's been great. So hopefully your weather is great, however you like it, wherever you are at. We have a huge episode today. I'm talking, there is stuff happening left and right. And I hope that you will stick with me. It's very interesting. There's a lot of things that are going on, and there's a lot of things that are very in flux and dynamic. And, we're going to be talking about, some tax bills that are going on in Alaska, as well as this new FDA a decision to come down on people being able to sell CBDs while it's under its health is being investigated, just to how healthy it is. We'll get into that. We're also going to talk about, as far as things being sunny, is possible tourist resorts and what would it be like to be able to enjoy a wonderful, beautiful, high-grade, edible or a joint or however you like it, a good vape. And where would you like to be? What's your best tourist destination that you would want to be able to smoke weed at? I don't know. I'll share what I think, but I think you might find one of the tourist locations to be very interesting indeed. We're going to get right into this. Lots of stuff going on. I do want to say, however, there's a few things going on in Alaska and nationwide regarding cannabis, and I like to do shout outs for some of these events that I think are really positive and good for the community and for the industry. The first one I'd like to talk about is the Northwest Cannabis Classic, coming out of last year being the first one, the inaugural year of 2015. The second annual one will be May 14th through the 15th. It's really cool. The Northwest Cannabis Classic, as they say on their website, offers growers and producers opportunity for both national and international recognition. And really just real brief, they're already in Oregon and Washington and are growing the competition and the business expo movement for cannabis, and they're already being national with it. I just want to give them a big thumbs up. But this says it's the only dedicated competition available to growers and producers of cannabis products, and giving the winners a unique opportunity to promote their product. And we don't cross from state to state. Each individual state has their own growers and their own competition, but then there's the group of winners, and when things do become legal, where we can cross state lines, then we will be able to then do more of a semifinal, and then you go into a full-blown competition. And I'm hoping that Northwest Cannabis Classic continues to grow to where it does become a national championship. I think that would be awesome to have more, all 50 states represented. So check them out. It's nwcannabisclassic.com, and they have been working very well with the industry in getting out the positive message, the truth about cannabis. So let's talk about this marijuana tax bill. And what I'm referring to is the Alaska Dispatch News had an article on March 20th by Laurel Andrews, and you can find that at adm.com, and you can also see a link on it on the Musing Monkeys Facebook page. Is the new bill would tax illegal marijuana grows in effort to combat black market, and they are bringing up a couple of different bills, House Bill 337, as well as they talk about the original bill that passed, and then there's Bill 30, and then House Bill 75. So I don't really talk about them specifically by number when I'm, going on a little bit. So I just want to make sure I get that out there now so you can do some research. Mr. Corey Ray from the Northwest Cannabis Classic actually contacted me with some questions regarding an article that he actually is authoring, and you will soon be able to find that at the nwcannabisclassic.com. So the question is, is taxing illegal marijuana grows going to have the intended impact of actually helping the legitimate marijuana industry? The legislators should be asking, what is the best way to implement cannabis commercialization while being as fair to all the market players as possible? We would almost all agree that less regulation and taxation across the board would be a good start. However, if there's going to be taxation, then let it be implemented in the most equitable way possible. If someone who grows tomatoes wants to sell beyond their neighborhood to the broader market, regulation and taxation is, in fact, the precedent. Now, since we're trying to educate the communities, sometimes the best way to communicate it is through treating cannabis the same a community does with other plants and veggies every day. By fighting the legal market, the black market propagates the drug stigma and gets an unfair market advantage. By enforcing tax penalties, which is the standard in the community's eyes, then yes, it can help the legitimate marijuana industry. But we have to be careful as a community that we do not demand equal treatment, but then go the other way and demand special treatment through exemption of regulation or taxation to take a product to market. It is not a question of whether the taxation is just. There's arguments about that both ways. The situation in front of us is a regulated and taxed infrastructure, and this tax penalty, in theory, would further remove motivators to stay in the black market, and it would not add any criminal penalties. My question is it equitable for an individual growing $1 million worth of black market cannabis to avoid the tax, which the guy next door pays to take his legal $1 million worth of cannabis to the market? Why shouldn't they pay for the back door they use to get their product, which is not tested and potentially not safe, to the market if, in fact, they get caught? The other question is, are there other steps lawmakers could take to ensure the marijuana industry actually gets off the ground? And this is a loaded question. It is my professional opinion, with the growth of bureaucracy and regulation, government bodies are now being put into a position to make a lot of uneducated decisions about a lot of things which do not really impact them or perceptually their constituency, or maybe not enough of their constituency. It is not human nature for them to consider the family who has dreams and ambition enough to work hard to create and produce a product their community will want. They don't consider the sacrificing costs to the individual and their family in order to work at building a business to sustain them and others within the community. They don't consider how ignorant regulation or statute can greatly and negatively impact that family in being productive members of the community. In short, they do more damage than good to the community they're supposed to be representing. Now, specifically speaking to the current legislative situation here, mentioned in this marijuana tax bill article, there are some things that need to change. And specifically, number one, the law which passed by voter majority officially opted in the entire state. That was the whole point of the vote. Under Alaska law, it now requires communities to take political action or special political action to opt out or back out of this new state law, and not the other way around. The current bill would force all unorganized boroughs into an opt-out category. In other words, they're going to put them back in the opt-out category, which then will only be able to be changed back to the opt-in by extra actions of the citizenry in those unorganized boroughs going around and trying to get support to make the change. I have serious questions about the legality of that in contradiction to the Alaska state law and precedent. Second of all, the legislator is saying that a resident's address cannot have more than 12 plants or enough for 2 adults. If a third resident is over 21, they're being denied their right to grow for themselves. And what is happening is the legislator has twisted the per person grow number with a per household number. And that is not what the law was put into practice to say. And thirdly, and there's actually probably more things than just 3, but the things that are, about this legislative situation before us will make the manufacturers and the retailers liable for the taxes of the cultivators if they don't pay them. This is incomprehensible. It completely makes no sense at all. There is no economic or legislative purpose behind this, and they're saying the idea is to help stymie the black market because we need to make sure that retailers aren't going to be trying to buy weed from the black market so they don't have to pay taxes on it and they can just sell it. Okay, well, manufacturers and retailers have already been given strict guidelines of tracking every piece of cannabis they work with. What motivation is there for manufacturers and retailers to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or more working to get established into a legal market just to go risk it by buying black market weed, which basically costs the same as from a legal grower and potentially is not safe and opens them up to lose all of that money that they have poured into it just to be legal? It's nonsensical, it is unequitable, it is unjust, and I have serious legal questions that I can be held liable as a retailer for my suppliers' taxes. Okay, let's say this. You own a Chick-fil-A. You love Chick-fil-A. Okay, and you order your cups from the Chick-fil-A warehouse, and in comes your cups. Now, those cups started at a factory somewhere and were formed and shaped and then labeled to say Chick-fil-A on them. And that manufacturer of that cup is not Chick-fil-A. They are a supplier of styrofoam and ink and packaging. How nonsensical would it be for Chick-fil-A to be held responsible for the tax liability of the cup maker if they don't pay their taxes? I don't even know how much more I can add to that. I mean, is there anything else I can add to that? And people still, possibly go, I just don't see what the problem is. Well, oh well, it is what it is. Another question someone asked me is, how much marijuana do you believe people should be allowed to grow at home? So, I say regulate cannabis and home grows the same way as any other garden plant. Grow as much as you want and give away as much as you want. Arizona allows cannabis to be sold at farmers markets, and there are no public safety numbers indicating any problems. You can do this, and there will still be a huge market for retail locations. It's called the free market. It's called supply and demand. However, if you want to sell cannabis in a retail store or to the broader market, your grow should comply with the same standards as other packaged foods sold to the public. You better have a safe and clean product, and you should be held liable for your product. You should also work within the regulations and work as an advocate in the light to change the laws that are not correct for future generations. So if in your state it is illegal to sell cannabis to anyone under 21, then you do not sell cannabis to anyone under 21. And if there is a need for someone under 21 or under 18 in order to receive cannabis, the Alaska and some other states have a medical marijuana program which does allow you more access to the plant. Is it ideal? Maybe not. But is it better than we were 40 years ago? Absolutely. So, you keep moving forward. But there comes a point, if you dig in your heels at the wrong time, you're just going to end up hurting yourself and hurting the whole cause. However, I will add this. It is prohibition and overregulation which keeps the black market thriving and prices high and violence around this botanical plant. Allowing the equal treatment of cannabis in comparison to other botanical plants will grow the industry and provide better products at less cost and much safer. And this is the lessons we learned with alcohol prohibition. And I will say this, a lot of people forget, and because that's from the 20s and 30s, and there's a lot of ramifications to that whole prohibition era that maybe necessarily is hard to equate to our current situation. But I can tell you, I lived in a petri dish. I lived in Western Alaska where it was considered a damp location where you could possess it, but you could not buy or sell alcohol. So the only way to get it was to order it from Anchorage and have it flown in. And then you had to show an ID, and you could pretty much order whatever the city allowed, and the city was, like so many bottles of wine and so much beer and so much hard alcohol in ounces at one time. And so people did that. But what about all the people that don't have the money to buy bulk order from Anchorage, or people who are on probation, and because they're on probation, they're told they're not allowed to drink? And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the case. Well, guess what? They're still going to look for it. They're still going to do it. And I lived there and I saw every day the effects of prohibition. I saw that there was a basically the same percentage of the population. It never really grew or shrank very much. It was pretty much a consistent percentage. And that regardless of any legality, they always seem to find something to drink. And they would end up in the hospital, or they would end up hurting somebody because of that violent atmosphere of the prohibition and black market. And you know what? Those effects are not any different than the effects of a certain percentage of the populace during alcohol prohibition early in the early 1900s, with people making crap out of crap and dying and killing people, and the rise of Al Capone. It's not because the quote-unquote natives can't handle their alcohol. And let me tell you, I've heard and had people actually sit and look at me in the face while having a beer in their hand, saying, well, I understand that, out there in Western Alaska and all these native environments, they really don't handle their alcohol very well. So maybe prohibition is the right thing for them. Okay. Now, some of my dear friends have said this, so I'm not trying to be rude or mean, but let's look at that in principle. That is highly bigoted and prejudice. And considering we acted the fool the same way when we were prohibited from alcohol, and I mean Caucasians, right, the typical American, then who are we to say that they can't handle their alcohol? What they can't handle is not having the education to make healthy choices. Because with prohibition, along with violence and the growth of law enforcement, is control over information. And if a young person cannot see their mom and dad be allowed to have what responsible adults are allowed to have, which is alcohol, on an unfettered way, to where they can have it just like you and I can have it, and they drink, come home and they drink a beer and they watch a game and everyone has a good time and there's no problems, then that child has that. But when the adult is prohibited and the whole community is prohibited, then all the younger generation sees is the abuse. And then they take on those same traits if they seek to be rebellious for whatever reason. It is prohibition which limits choice, it limits education, it limits freedom, introduces violence, introduces disease, it introduces criminality. And it really cannot be broken down more simple than that. Just look to Western Alaska and compare it to the same thing that happened in this country in the early 1900s, and you tell me if it's because of their genealogy or if it's because of a system that prohibits and thus denies human beings education and access to a product that can be used responsibly by a community if they are just allowed to have access to it. That's why criminality should not be attached to drug use. Rehabilitation needs to be attached to drug abuse. Drug abuse, I mean heroin, I mean meth, I mean alcohol. I do not mean cannabis, because cannabis is a botanical plant who, again, is the guy in the side corner just hanging out against his will with the heroin and the meth, and all of a sudden gets rounded up with all the bad guys going, what the flip, man? What did I do? I help people sleep. I make people feel happy. I take away pain. I'm not quite sure why I'm being grouped with heroin and meth. And let me say this, because of all the huge medical evidence of cannabis, and regardless of whether you take it for medical or recreational, it still has that same amazing health benefit. Wouldn't you say that it's been a blessing in disguise to have cannabis available within at least the black market to all of these drug addicts, these poor people who need rehabilitation and help and not be criminalized and thrown in jail, that in their pursuit of these terrible chemicals sold by filthy, disgusting people and pushing heroin and meth and all these terrible, terrible drugs, right? They also have access to cannabis. And yet, because cannabis is so healthy and it's so good for you and it has great effects, praise the Lord God Almighty, or whoever you want to say, man, good things, such a healthy botanical plant was there, so that even though they were taking other drugs which were terrible, they could at least also have access, unlike the rest of the public, responsible people, to this cannabis plant, which will actually help them medically and help their pain and to help their mind, etc. And many drug addicts have used cannabis to come off of the hard drugs, and cannabis does that because it is a plant. It is a dietary supplement. It is healthy and nutritional. And with that, I am going to take a break.
This is Fun Time Oldies, Kick 66. Funtime Oldies Kick 66. Catch us if you can at funtimeoldies.com.
Earlier in the show, I had mentioned about looking at a tourist destination that might actually prove to be quite interesting, though I'm not quite sure how long it would take to get there. But this website is mirror.co.uk. The title of the article is Tourist Resort on the Moon Will Let Brave Holidaymakers Bask in Constant Sunshine. The European Space Agency reveals further details about its plan for a lunar village, which will offer travelers a trip that is truly out of this world. What they say here is that this incredible moon village will one day allow tourists to stay on the moon. Mr. Johan Dichrichone, and I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced, it's looking at the grammatical way, Johan Dichrichone, who is in the ESA Director General, said holidaymakers will be invited to stay on the incredible lunar resort, as well as businessmen, scientists, and even miners who are likely to be interested in extracting minerals from the moon. This is very interesting. However, it says wearing a bikini is likely to be a no-no because humans would need to don a spacesuit to avoid instant death on the freezing, airless lunar surface. Okay. Now, the question is it worth going through that in order to be in constant sunshine? Well, let's see. It says here that the danger is instant death on the freezing, airless lunar surface. Well, I live in Alaska, and we get like 22 hours of sunlight, and you can breathe. I am totally kidding. I think it would be super awesome to go to the moon. Now, imagine being on the lunar beach, preferably inside of a building so you don't have to be inside of a spacesuit, unless you can go out. Oh my goodness. What if you could hot box a spacesuit on the moon? Now that is a tourist destination where you get to go bounce around on the moon, hot boxing your astronaut suit. Boom. That's it. That is now on my bucket list. That's the ideal vacation, is to go hot box a spacesuit on the moon. I would like to know where there would be places maybe a little more terrestrial we could go to and enjoy the wonderful world of cannabis. You know, I've often thought, sitting on the beach in Barbados with a glass of rum in the sunset, watching the ocean and smoking a giant blunt. I think that would be so relaxing and so enjoyable. Some more people are more adventurous, maybe skydiving, like being able to enjoy a nice big bowl and then go jump out of an airplane. That would be interesting. Maybe you have already got this all figured out. So you need to go to @themusingmonkey on Twitter and shoot a twit. No, don't shoot a twit. Whatever you do not shoot twits. There's no twit shooting here, okay? We love everybody, but shoot a Twitter message and tell me where you think you would like to go as a tourist destination and be able to smoke cannabis. Now, and tourist destination doesn't mean some big, huge, fancy-pantsy hotel. It could be some hole-in-the-wall little third-world country that you just really like to go and enjoy where... So let's just imagine that there's no legal issues and you could just smoke weed. That's Colorado's got the bud and breakfast, and I know that's going to happen here in Alaska as well. And I told you it was a big show because now we've got some other big news that I wanted to cover, and that is in regards to the FDA now making it illegal to market CBDs, which is the natural organic chemical in cannabis and in every other organic plant. That obviously, because it's in plants, works with our bodies and they have different effects, but they're all healthy. They're saying you can't market them as a dietary supplement now because they don't fall under the definition. And there's going to be people that are going to latch on to this and say, see, even the FDA says that CBDs don't fall under the definition of a dietary supplement. But that's not really what they're saying, and it's not because the CBDs in cannabis are any different than the CBDs in chocolate or in oranges or already in you. It is because of politics and marketing. And people go, oh, great, here they go again. Well, I tell you what, this is directly from the FDA's own website, and it is a letter to Mr. Richard Richardson, CEO of Dose of Nature. And in this several-page letter, we're going to cover 2 or 3 different principles and issues that I'm finding in here in order to help maybe bring a different perspective. Now, Mr. Richardson received this in February of 2016. It says here, this is to advise you that the Food and Drug Administration reviewed your websites at doseofnature.com, healthydoseofnature.com, and puredoseofnature.com, and has determined that you are taking orders for different hemp extract products. Some of them are in organic olive oil. Some of them are, in just, clinical grade in some type of tincture, which completely falls under the FDA's own definition of a dietary supplement, which can be found on their website, fda.gov. And you see here, what is a dietary supplement? A dietary supplement is a product intended for ingestion that contains a dietary ingredient intended to add further nutritional value to supplement the diet. A dietary ingredient may be one or any combination of the following substances: a vitamin, a mineral, an herb or other botanical, an amino acid, a dietary substance for use by people to supplement the diet by increasing the total dietary intake, a concentrate, metabolite, an extract, or tincture. Dietary supplements may be found in many forms such as tablets, capsules, soft gels, gel caps, liquids, or powders. Some dietary supplements can help ensure that you get an adequate dietary intake of essential nutrients. Others may help you reduce your risk of disease. And the reason that there is a difference between a dietary supplement and, say, a pharmaceutical is because a pharmaceutical is not plucked off of a tree like an orange, or from the ground like kale, which ground of the ocean, I suppose, or a cannabis plant, or hemp, because they are of the earth, part of the earth. And take special note that it actually says at the end here, it says, others may help you reduce your risk of disease. So they write this letter to Mr. Richardson, and they say that we've determined you're taking order for these dietary supplements, and that your website is labeling indicates that these products contain cannabidiol, CBD. In addition, we determined that you take orders at the above website for the following products that do not claim to have CBDs, and just some other items. Now, it says here, the claims on your website establish that the products listed above are drugs under section blah, blah, blah of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act because they are intended for use in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease. As explained further below, introducing or delivering these products for introduction into interstate commerce for such uses violate the act. So what they're saying is this. They're saying, hey, dude, we checked out your website. We noticed that you're selling this organic and, yes, according to the own FDA's guidelines, is a dietary supplement. However, because you're claiming that it is for the use to cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent diseases, you're not allowed to do that because because they have not been properly tested and approved by the FDA to say that they do in fact cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent the disease. Well, that's because he can say that it helps with all of these physical ailments under the definition of the FDA dietary supplement, which says others may help you reduce your risk of disease. And as you go through the letter and see what they are accusing him of, they're accusing him of saying things like it calms your nerves and lessens your aches and pains with hemp oil from Dose of Nature. Is it claiming curing, mitigating, treating, or preventing disease? No, it's talking about relieving, but even so, because it's a dietary supplement, then it could technically help reduce the risk of disease. So he is clearly within his rights to say that. They also say recovering from Lyme disease can be a long and grueling process during which you can experience a number of terrible side effects. Dose of Nature has a number of products that can assist you dealing with muscle pain, fatigue, migraines, and more. Is he claiming to cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent the disease? And he's not claiming to cure it, but under a dietary supplement, he is saying that it is a dietary intake of essential nutrients that may help reduce your risk of disease. And the question then boils down to, well, then why are they saying that it doesn't fall under the definition of a dietary supplement? Bum, bum, bum. Are you ready for this drum roll here? By their own words, based on the product labeling, it appears you may intend to market your products as dietary supplements. You should be aware that based on available evidence, FDA has concluded that CBD products are excluded from the dietary supplement definition under section blah, 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 bum, bum. Under that provision, if a substance such as CBD has been authorized for investigation as a new drug for which substantial clinical investigations have been instituted and for which the existence of such investigations has been made public, then products containing that substance are outside the definition of a dietary supplement. So it's not because chemically the CBDs are different than the CBDs in organic life. It is because they decided that they wanted to investigate it, whether it could potentially be used in pharmaceutical drugs. And while they try to figure that out, you're not allowed to sell it, and you're not allowed, you're not allowed to market it or sell it as a dietary supplement. So you're not allowed to market it as a drug because it doesn't meet the definitions of a drug. And nor has it gone through all the extensive, highly expensive testing and approval. But also, you're not allowed to call it a dietary supplement because we're investigating it as a medicine. And until we discover just why it is that way, you're not allowed to use it and call it a dietary supplement, even though CBDs are in everything already. And that really, when you're reading the dietary supplement definition, the vitamin, the mineral, the herb or other botanical, the amino acid, you know what? A high number of those have CBDs that are part of the reason why you feel good. So let me paraphrase all of that into this. Let's use apple trees as an example. The way I'm looking at this letter is what they're saying is, you know what? We see an apple and we're going to pluck this apple and we see that people eat it and it does good things for them. So while we decide how it can be manipulated into pharmaceuticals, you're not allowed to sell apples and call them dietary supplements until we figure out why it is they're just so good. And then really what that means is so then we can get the pharmaceuticals to take those chemicals, create something and patent it, which then keeps you from being able to sell it not because it's not a dietary supplement and not because it's a drug or not. No, it's because you don't have a patent on it. And we have a very special guest, a secret guest coming up tomorrow that is going to be interviewed that we're going to talk about this more, because I like what he said. He said, actually, it's not that they walked up and plucked the apple from the tree. What they said is, no, for 100 years, they've been telling us, no, you can't grow the tree. You're not allowed to eat apples. And then when people do grow and eat them and they start turning out to actually be good for you, then they turn out and say, well, you can't eat it and you can't sell it because we're going to figure out why it's so good for you. And all the while, if they go to their own website, it will tell them why it's good for them, because it's a dietary supplement. Boom. Mic dropped. Whew, I'm telling you, it is nonsensical. I use that word a lot, folks. I really do. But, until I can get another adjective, I guess that's the one I'm going to use. So I apologize if you don't like it that I use it that much. But it is so unbelievable that the bureaucracy is swirling with all these little gears, and this is the problem when you start getting these large centralized bureaucratic governments where these people are not affected. You know what? The person who wrote this letter is still going to go home and sleep in bed and get a paycheck. Mr. Richard Richardson, who is a hard working entrepreneur and doesn't have a guaranteed check because he writes letters, but he has a guaranteed check because he works his ass off and offers a really good product. No, he's the one that's affected, folks. He's the one that potentially is going to lose money. It's potentially him that's going to be bankrupt. It's going to be him then that is going to lose out. And why? Because hemp is dangerous? Because it's a drug? Because it's a pharmaceutical that he's infringing patents on? No, it's because he's selling, by the FDA's own confession, a dietary supplement. When you look at the science of it, which really is what matters, because it's the science that tells people whether something is good or not and can give them evidence to make healthy decisions. And the FDA wants to restrict information. And I talked about that earlier in the show, what prohibition does. It restricts the flow of information. And they go on with their explanation that because it's under investigation, you can't use CBDs as a dietary supplement, okay? And they're saying is what classifies something as under investigation is if it's been made public, and they give examples of Sativex and Epidiolex, which have CBDs in them and are under investigation to see how they work with this new medicine. Of course, these are manipulated, much probably like spice is. And the CBDs in the organic plant that you pluck and smoke or turn into an edible really aren't the same thing, because they're taking it and messing around with it. And so they're saying that the FDA, the only thing that would authorize you to be able to use this cannabis plant or hemp plant or whatever, CBDs, as a dietary supplement is if you can show that it was marketed as a dietary supplement before the investigations were conducted or started. And it says here, the FDA, in their letter, FDA is not aware of any evidence that would call into question its current conclusion that CBD products are excluded from the dietary supplement definition, because they are saying there has been no marketing of it as a dietary supplement. So let me get this right. 100 years ago, you tell us we can't grow the tree, which means if we can't grow it, we can't market it. And now you're telling us because we haven't marketed it, we can't sell it or call it a dietary supplement. Not because of the chemicals, but because of regulation. Well, it's funny because I wonder what the statute is of how much precedent of marketing as a dietary supplement you would need before the investigation started. Because prior to the prohibition of cannabis in the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, or late 1800s, guess what? It was marketed all the time as a dietary supplement in pharmacies and at local grocers, etc., etc. So there actually is substantial precedent that cannabis is a dietary supplement. And it was not until the government prohibited it that it stopped. So I hope there's some lawyers out there that see that, and hopefully Mr. Richardson's lawyers will see that, and they'll be able to attack that exactly where it's at. Oh, man, we can give you ample proof and just start pulling out old marketing, pull out old farming, pull out all this stuff, and we've got tons of human history. Gee, wonder why? Because it's a supplement. This is simply, another attempt for bureaucracy to hedge and protect the pharmaceutical companies. And that is not conspiracy theory. It is ample empirical evidence that is within the reach of your fingers at your local library as well as the internet, and just talk to your neighbors who use cannabis. and if you even know who they are. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that this is something worth fighting for, because in closing, let me say this. As I look at this letter, and they are citing all the things that he is, quote unquote, claiming these hemp extracts can do, even though we've got long human history and plenty of precedent to prove it as a dietary supplement, it's like, yeah, there's people out there with chronic pain. Yeah, man, there's people out there with cancer. Oh, man, there's people out there, who have Lyme disease. There are veterans who our country gave an oath to take care of because they gave service to the need of the country. And those people need help. And it's a little unfortunate that societies have gotten to the point that they are okay with the bureaucracy that creates confusion, which creates this prohibition, which creates this incomprehensible jargon, when all the while what really matters is the dude with PTSD, is the poor gal with Lyme disease. And I understand the blood kit and saying, that kit can help you track your tumor markers. That is a sketchy science to be doing out of your house. And you're selling an item, a product, not a plant, saying that this can do this. And we have to be careful, because there are individuals out there who would want to be deceitful in their marketing practices of what can be healthy. And so I don't fully, disagree with the FDA about the blood test kits, but that is comparing apples and plastic. Not apples and oranges, it's comparing apples and plastic. And that is all the time that we have today for this Interviews, News, and Muse. I appreciate your time today. You can check us out at themusingmonkey.com. You can find us at Twitter at themusingmonkey. And today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/themusingmonkey. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can read it on your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, your MP3 player, your laptop, your computer, and it is fantastic. In fact, all this talk about government bureaucracy today reminds me of a great, great series called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. 6 novels in that series where it takes the idea of bureaucracy and, of course, in a very humorous British way, expands it to the size that reaches beyond the galaxy. I'll just leave it at that for you. So if you check them out, you can get that 30-day free trial. If you go to themusingmonkey.com, at the bottom, you will see that we love books, and you can click on there. You can also check out our affiliates page, where I would like to thank funtimeoldies.com, Funtime Oldies Kick 66. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you on the other side. Cheers.